it's like being in the throes of your mental health being down, in depression or anxiety or whatever it is. And support, help come in many forms. And being able to reach out for that and who can help support you during that time. My name's Marnie Grodzin, and what do I do? That's a good question. I'm a social worker and have done a variety of things, and recently opened up Gathered and Grounded here in Decatur. And it's sometimes a challenge to explain exactly what we do, but the mission is holistic, positive and supportive mental and physical health services for youth and those who care for them. So I run it and operate it, and then what I bring to it as far as a service is yoga for youth 18 and under, and with the yoga, meditation and breath work, and we'll begin this summer with one-on-one therapeutic yoga sessions. I mean, the idea is, one is I think it would be a great marriage with someone going through individual counseling or group therapy counseling, because the one-on-one experience, it can become more personalized in knowing what that person is possibly facing. Those themes can be woven in. You also don't know what comes out when you're working on yoga, when you're breathing, when you're meditating. You hear stories, well, not stories, it's true, but people, start crying and feeling emotional when they're in a yoga class. And so sometimes that's a right time to explore what's going on. And in, a general yoga class, that doesn't necessarily happen. We knew 20 years ago, and probably beyond, that the body holds in the trauma in our experiences. But there was that line, there was the head and there was the body. But as the years have gone on, and I wouldn't say mainstream, but it's, I don't know, like 30% getting to mainstream or something. Yes, the trauma is held in the body. When you talk of people who have panic attacks, their triggers, and that stress, that level of stress. I mean, when we're stressed, our hormones are working differently, our thinking is differently. There is the ACEs study that took place in California. Kaiser Permanente, I guess, sponsored it. And they looked at trauma in children and carrying it up into adulthood. And essentially there's 10 factors that they look at that follow people and can be held in their body. And we know with stress, the cortisol is running, how it affects the whole system. So, and I think maybe we talked about this, stigma was, and I say was, past tense, for me, almost worse than any diagnosis you could put on me or, what I was facing. And I think in general, because of how the world is, although I think it's changing, in pockets. But for me, carrying that Rock of Gibraltar, that's how I was defined in my mind. And I'm sure people valued me and looked at me in a different way. But my gosh, if I shared what was going on, then in my mind, well, that's just going to abolish that. I am not credible for anything. And so I really hit it. I mean, I was, let's see, it probably took me 4 or 5 years to realize really where I talked about it. Just to loved ones. I mean, I was hiding it from my husband. I mean, I would take care of life, crash, go to bed, just throw some clothes on right before I had to get the kids or they were coming home. I was in charge of different things, making up excuses why I couldn't follow through. And it was really about 3 years ago, I was involved in a pretty high-level situation, and which I knew that's I was starting that, struggling a little bit to get out of bed, the thoughts in my head being more negative. And I freaked out that I did this, but now I'm so thankful. I just put together an email to this group of people, and said, even though I didn't feel this way, I said, I battle with depression, and I can sense that I'm kind of going, deeper with it. And I know I couldn't serve as well as I should with this project, and, went further. And I said, I say this without shame, because it's no different if, like, my liver, my kidney weren't working. And I was so amazed at the responses that came back, how supportive they were. A couple people just shared their story, like, I grew up with a mom, or this was like a small group of people, like 6 people. One day I found a vase of flowers just left, at my doorstep. And so that was like that opening. And as soon as I started talking about it, and I had this video that I put out that people saw, and it was just all these conversations started. And that's like where the lift was. It was like coming out of the mental health closet, the mental illness closet. And it was freeing, and, just not having to be secretive, not having to have the shame, and then being able to share. And I guess just the way I'm raised in my profession is like giving back. And like what we were just saying, like, it takes everything off the surface, and, deeper conversations, really understanding who people are. I would not be here right now opening up Gathered and Grounded. We would not be here having this, conversation and making a difference, in the world. And I think for our generation, we need to be real and raw. I mean, still having boundaries, because if we want to get rid of that stigma, the next generations and the upcoming ones need to see that we walk in this world, we can be successful. It's not tattooed across our forehead. And I think too, it's, where is someone in the throes of their mental health? I mean, like, I know for me, like, if I was at my lowest, I mean, for me, that's like almost non-communicative and not eating and just not part of this world. I couldn't have those conversations. I don't even know if I would hear the person, right? So I think too, it's like the timing of, when talking to someone. But I think it's for those of us who talk about it in, I guess, mental health advocates in a way, it's like it's living our life and people seeing that and not forcing it, on someone. I'm finishing a certification in therapeutic yoga, which that can be anything from like physical ailments to mental health, and
which are the same thing.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Yes. Hello. See? Yeah. But that's interesting. It's almost like having to explain that to people, because if I just went like it's only for mental health, and let me backtrack. When I say physical, like someone who has MS or Parkinson's, like being aware of what poses don't you do and how much do you push someone and making modifications. So, and then it's the same thing when we're dealing with someone's mental health, because there can, be triggers, and there's certain breathing that we would not want to do with someone who has anxiety. And there are some breathing techniques we would specifically want to do. So, understanding all of that. But for me, like, yoga and meditation is part of my everyday process to keep me healthy. And it's accessible to anyone and everyone. People do not necessarily have to go to class. And I know it's helped me tremendously. The irony of it is when deep in the throes, there's no thought of even doing it. And particularly with meditation, because it's like, if I sit down right now and the thoughts that'll pop in my head, like how freaky is that? And that should be specifically the time I would be sitting down. But by sticking with it, amongst other things, it's like my prevention, just like someone who's having heart issues, the medicine that they take possibly, and the exercise, the diet, sleep. If you think about it, all the different like physical other parts of the body, even though mental health is linked to it all those things are done, right? So we have to do the same thing, for our brain. But I think out in the, general public, it's, medication. That's what everyone thinks of. But there's so much more in the toolbox. When I wake up in the morning, I think about briefly, like I'll ask myself some questions like, do you feel like you got rest? If I feel like I haven't, I'm like, okay, so when did you go to bed? Or if you woke up in the middle of the night, what did you do? Like, did you pick up your phone to see what time it is and then like go down that rabbit hole? So trying to keep my sleep in check. Waking up, like if I were to feel like I was hungover, my mind goes to like, okay, so how did you eat yesterday, type of thing. Are you dehydrated? And then I think about, okay, did you go exercise yesterday? If you didn't, get your butt out there, today. Same thing like with the yoga and the meditation, making sure I'm taking my medicine. And for me, the big one is how I've dedicated my time, not necessarily to all those, but through this whole process of learning about myself, I have discovered that you couldn't find in my opinion, more of an introvert for me. Like that's what I am. And I will say that to people and they're like, what? And then explaining the extrovert, introvert of it's where you get your energy. And I think the role of being the Rock of Gibraltar in my mind, for the last 20 some years, if I was invited to this or I was asked to do that, professional life, someone's like, do you know a therapist or do you know that? And it's like, oh, I'll do it. I'll take it. And not ever wanting to, or even thinking to be by myself. Plus, I think the fear of, well, I'm the Rock of Gibraltar. If I say no to somebody, then I'll be by myself. And then who am I? It's just like this constant. So now I would say the largest thing, it's hard to say what is number one. There probably isn't a number one. But is knowing my limits. I don't schedule too many appointments with people. Days that I go teach, I teach at a mental health. No, at a middle school, teaching about mental health.
Okay.
On those days, like if I'm invited to something that night, no, like I won't go. And I will say it's been a struggle with Gathered and Grounded, because where is that line of, oh gosh, like if I say no to this meeting, and when I'm there a lot, I keep the door open, because you need to have that exposure, and then people are stopping in, which is lovely, but it's usually not a 5-minute conversation. So I'm a little depleted of energy, and then I'm like, okay, I was supposed to do computer work. So trying to manage that is the largest thing. And I think it's definitely changed relationships. Some friends are like, what do you mean you don't want to go out? Used to be that girl who's like, yeah, let's go out dancing or whatever. But it's just not worth it to me. And if people don't understand that, then, maybe we're in your life for the wrong reasons. There's so much to say. I would say if we look at each individual, mental health has touched their life. Mental health does not have to be an official diagnosis. In fact, I kind of sometimes push all of that stuff away. This sums it up. Dental health, we learned about when we were younger. Physical health, we learned about, how we should be active and the fuel going into our body and sleep and all of that. So what about mental health, right? That simple. So mental health, we all need to pay attention to it. And sometimes, just like in the physical health, even though it is all connected, we have to go get a checkup because something isn't right, and we have to make adjustments. And again, maybe it's diet, and maybe it's medication, or not going and doing those exercises, or don't go travel for a while. There's no difference.